TV building or the log building? Administration.
We're going to begin our program here. I'd like to ask people to move here in the circle here before we get started. If you would, please move up and join us in the circle.
I know. Stick it up. I went and I fell down. Oh, it was really funny. Day after Christmas?
Woglakapi. Good morning. Welcome to the 49th annual SG Founders Week celebration in Wocekiye. Snowing and a little cold out, so we're all kind of moving a little bit deliberately today, but that's all right. We really appreciate your time. We gather here this time of the year to do any number of things. First and foremost, we want to acknowledge and thank those that walked here before us in terms of establishing the institution of higher education here on the Rosebud. It's become a very strong symbol of hope for the Sichango Eyapi. We do a lot of different work here, and so we want to also have the opportunity to share with you some of our accomplishments, and along with some of our challenges. And we have a whole week-long program, and we're kind of shifting gears to the extent where we have a need to basically reach out to the community and ask for stakeholders' input about the future, as President Bordeaux talks about the next chapter. And so we have a number of activities going on. First and foremost, we have a comprehensive self-study for accreditation. We're working on that, and that affects the future in part. We also are doing strategic planning. We'll talk about that. And we're tapping, again, the community, the leadership, tribal members, your thoughts, your ideas about how we can shape up the future of not only the university, but the Sichango Eyapi. We have any number of topics. We'll start out with Lakota language and culture today, but every fabric of our well-being, the quality of life here, we hope to touch base here over the next 4 days. At the same time, this week we're going to be celebrating the 25th anniversary of federal legislation that bestowed land-grant status for tribal college universities. In 1994, U.S. Congress recognized 29 institutions of higher education to receive land-grant status and to carry out in fulfilling the mission of tribal nation building. So we have a special meeting and ceremony. You're all invited on Friday morning. And we have a delegation coming from South Dakota State University. They represent the 1862 land-grant institutions. And they want to expand the partnership with SGU, and so they've come up with an updated MOU, and we'll have a special signing for that on Friday. Thursday, we have staff student recognition dinner, and again, people are invited to come to that. Tonight we got family night, and that's always a pretty good time. And then Tuesday we'll have an indigenous film presentation on blood memory, and that'll be over at Lakota Studies Teepee. And then of course we'll wrap up the week and celebrate with our annual Chipi, and it's a little snowy today, but they're saying it's going to be banana belt weather by Friday. So hang tough as best as you can to get through the wind and the cold, and we look forward to the future. I'd like to extend a special greeting to our relatives, friends, and guests that are out there in cyberspace, scattered in all 4 directions. I'm using technology to live stream all our events and to share again our accomplishments and to let people know all the good work that's going on. Well, that's what's kind of shaping up for the week. Right now, it's my pleasure to introduce the president of Sinte University, going on his 47th year as the president. He's the longest tenured president of any college or university in the country, Dr. Lionel Bordeaux.
Vastelo. Vämi takwe pilan petugia. Chante vastjana petjusapelo. Am petu oyokpi. Het gaan kal. Osnik in a wahin heke hashmai hena. Which ook eilo. Hena I Wakan gaan ka gawoel chunsa. Tokelog amma gokipsti. Daar komen die Yuha onkia ochte. I'm going to thank the ceremony organizers, participants this morning, led by Fred Little Bald Eagle, drummers, Rockin' K. You have Les makes room for them, Chad Whitefeather, Felix Hawk, Justin Baker, Pacer Hayes, and Gina One-Star as the organizer. Opilat Kanka Ikiciyuskinpi Yuha. I want to welcome everyone to the 49th annual Sinte University Founders Week celebration. And I want to thank the visionaries and the founders back in the 60s and 70s, led by Stanley Redbird Sr., Isidore Whitehat, Bill Menard, Nancy Whitehorse, Albert Whitehat, Sherry Red Owl, first employee, Rosebud Community for passing the first resolution, and Webster Tuhawk and his tribal council back in the early 70s for getting Sinte University, which was the Rosebud College Center at one time, off the ground. Tremendous undertaking when you think back to what's happened historically for a tribal nation to step forward, much like the Dene, Navajo, Oyate, and they're starting Navajo Community College, which is now known as Dene. And since then, 37 tribal colleges are in existence throughout the country, and several are on the drawing board. So this is going to do nothing but expand and get bigger and bigger as time goes on. Many people call it one of the most historical and courageous acts and undertaking that any country ever did to strengthen and address the future of who we are as tribal nations. A lot of people didn't give tribal colleges the credit that they were going to survive, but through the strength, tenacity of our families, and particularly our students, our young ones, who wanted an education, wanted an ability to strike out on their own in behalf of themselves, their family, and their tribal nation. They enrolled. We were able to get very committed faculty, staff, board of regents, and has been said a tribal council that chartered and supported the institution. And we're able to get tribal colleges off the ground. We've come a long way with that movement. Some people call it a very tremendous educational experiment, but it's worked, and it's still working, and it will continue to work, because that's the spirit that these institutions have, mirrored after ancestry. The many leaders, the many women, strong women, families. Our institution carries the name of Sinte Gleska, Chief Spotted Tail. Very well could have carried other names. We've had tremendous leadership, Iron Shells, Hollowhorn Bears, Swift Bears, many others who were the early leaders here on the Rosebud. But we know that with their continued guidance, involvement through prayer and ceremony, they continue to watch after us and give us that strength in that direction to be who we say we want to be and not who somebody else wants us to be. Towards that end, we've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. We still don't own our own education. Our people had a tremendous educational system before colonization ever come our direction. Our village, in stages, was our instructors. But we come across an educational system in a lot of ways that took a lot away from us and didn't safeguard a lot of the culture, the language, and the history. But we're getting that back, slowly, but we're getting it back. And likewise, one day, we will develop our own accreditation system, and we will own our own education. That's what Stanley and the founders wanted. They said, who's to say that you have to go to school 8 years or 12 years to get an 8th grade or 12th grade education? Who's to say you have to go to school 2 years or 4 years to get an associate degree or a bachelor's degree? Or go another 2 years and another 3 years to get a master's and a doctor's respectively? They said this is our role and responsibility to define who we are and what we want, and to restructure education so that we have an educational system that is and best serves who we are. Takes into credit our experience, They say, why not give women who've had children, motherhood, recognize the sacredness, the spirituality, the beauty of that, and give motherhood credit so that when they enroll here, maybe they have a semester or a year to their credit. And do the same with veterans. Somebody serves, commits themselves to the military, when they come back, give them the same due. Give them a semester or 2 semesters or longer. People with experience in the work area, recognize that. Or families. Sit down and create a system of education that we want for ourselves, that we don't have to have the system that we have now, that we can vary the system of education. We can go in and out, much like you're driving a car and you change lanes, or you turn off, and then you get back on again. But this is what these forums are for, to sit down and to be able to take a look. And this gathering this week here will propel us towards that next chapter. And we'll have follow-up meetings where we sit down and we talk to the different stakeholders. Particularly youth need to be involved. They have a tremendous insight and an ability and a future that awaits our young ones. What is it that they want that future to be? How do they want that defined and articulated? I remember years ago I was watching late television. Newt Gingrich, well-known Republican, run for president, was on CNN newsroom. And he started talking about the concerns in Indian country because there wasn't a real strong national tribal policy in our behalf. And he said because of it, things are happening on reservations that should not happen. And he went right down the line. And he talked about education, talked about lack of employment, talked about lack of housing, lack of technology, lack of good health, talked about judicial, and he just went right down the line. And then he said, on the Rosebud Sioux Indian Reservation in South Dakota. Boy, I sat up. Why, here's this well-known Republican talking about Rosebud on national television. And he said, they lead the world proportionately in suicides. He said, what a dismal place for that so many young think suicide is the only answer. And that was very disturbing to hear. And I remember Charlie Clome becoming very upset. And he said, that's our role and responsibility to define ourselves. How dare somebody else talk about us? And that's why Stanley started this institution, to strengthen the Sichangu Oyate. And that's why other tribal colleges, universities are started, to strengthen their tribal nations in all areas that affect the quality of our daily life. It's for us to redefine and define who we are and who we want to be. This institution, our Oyate, sits at the crossroads today. We need to ramp it up to that next level. That's why it's important we get off with prayer and ceremony. And we have you here to give us ideas so that we listen to what it is that you'd like to have, you'd like to see in our different areas. And we're on YouTube. We ask our friends and supporters, our tribal members who live in cities, who are at home now because of the weather and can't come here today, or who are various parts of the country, or who are various parts of the world, not only in the military, but who may be living in foreign countries, but who are from Rosebud. They have the opportunity, and we thank Roger and Pauline, Jim Cortez for setting this up so that we can go worldwide with who we are. Our relatives want to be involved in helping develop a strong tribal nation and a strong Sinte Gleska University. We have many areas that await us. When Stanley talked about strengthening and defining, coming up with a new system of education, he talked about the same thing in the area of culture. How do we come together to strengthen our culture? Gail Spotted-Tail and them did a survey, and they said there's only 600 fluent Lakota speakers on the Rosebud today. And we have how many thousand enrolled members? 30,000 roughly, counting everybody on and off. That's a responsibility that we have. How do we pull this together? Get everybody at the table to address strengthening our culture. How do we get our schools, K through 12, get them involved? At some point, if they're on a reservation, we need to control them. We have sovereignty, we have the treaties, we have self-determination. All of these are to our benefit. We need a plan of action to sit down and say what it is that we want to do. So this week is very important. Days ahead are very important. The years ahead are very important. But it's all of us coming together, regardless of what entity, who we are. We should have one educational system on the Rosebud. Yes, you can carry the names, whatever, but in terms of the philosophy and the direction, the ownership, there should be one common purpose in every one of these areas that address our strengthening. That's where we want to head this week and as a follow-up. In closing, I thank each and every one of you for coming here, wishing you a good week, a good winter, a good spring, and a good future. We all deserve that. We've had some tough times as tribal people, starting 500 years ago. Things changed drastically for us. Fortunately, we've been able to hold on to a lot of it. And we must build on what we're holding on to and expand that. So these little Kakojas coming up, they'll know the language. They'll know the song and dance. They'll know the ceremonies. That's what Stanley and the visionaries and the founders had in mind when they started these institutions. So with that, Pilong Apelo. Thank you, love you, and have a good day.
Thank you, Lionel. For our friends out there in cyberspace, again, good morning from the Rosebus Reservation. And you heard our president talked about the next chapter, and it's going to take a lot of effort on everyone's part. And in case there's anybody out there with money that wants to donate to the university, we need to take it, because here's the president's book, and it's kept together with duct tape, the universal tool. So if you want to donate some duct tape or another book for the president, I'm sure he'd appreciate that. Okay. We're going to open up this morning's program focused on Lakota culture and language. As you heard the president talks about, it's the very essence, the very foundation of who we are as Sicangu people, and it serves to drive the values and the philosophies and our practices here at Sinte University. I earlier mentioned accreditation, and you heard the president talk about accreditation. The mainstream accreditation comes through the Higher Learning Commission. They're based out of Chicago. And as I talked about earlier, we're in for a 9-month effort to tell people who we are, tell our story, talk about how we do business here as a tribal college, and then probably a year from this April, we'll be anticipating an accreditation site visit, comprehensive site visit. There's 5 areas of criterion. There must be a half a dozen sub-criterion underneath, and we have to respond to all of those. So we're up for the task, and we're going to do that. At the same time, we have approached the World Indigenous Nations Higher Education Consortium in our efforts to revitalize, to reframe our Lakota language and culture, our Indigenous culture education program. And Dr. Jim Green, our Director for Advancing Continuing Education, is helping us navigate that accreditation process, and so I'm going to ask him to come forward and kind of just share some overviews in terms of what we're trying to do. WINHEC does not dictate any standards. They frame the questions so that the institution talks about itself on its own terms, on its own values, its own philosophies. And we will put together that self-study, and about the same time with HLC next year, an international team will go out. We had the privilege of being at the WINHEC board meeting in Norway this past August, and Sinte University was successful in having our application approved. The WINHEC organization, for the purposes that you heard President Bordeaux talk about, of defining education, claiming ownership of it, a while back, we were inspired by indigenous group, the Maoris down in New Zealand. They were facing cultural loss, cultural genocide, and they sued the British Crown, and lo and behold, they won. And they were able to get some goshpops, some revenue from the Crown to basically focus at bringing back their language and culture. And so they put the effort together, and we're happy to report that they are on a good road of reclaiming who they are. And they hosted some tribal colleges here. Lionel and Albert and others went down to New Zealand, again, participated in their ceremonies. And out of there came the effort to organize internationally. There's indigenous people all around the world that are struggling just like we are here. And so the WINHEC organization was established through Sinte University and our president. He represented the US, and they went up to Canada, had a signing ceremony, and that's been over almost 20 years ago. So WINHEC has a lot to be proud of, and a lot of gratitude to the Rosebud and to Dr. Bordeaux in particularly in terms of what we are trying to do. So Dr. Jim, you want to come on up here and start facilitating the discussion here? The other thing I want you to keep in mind as we talk about the future is in less than 18 months, we're going to be celebrating the 50th anniversary of Sinte University, 50 years old. So again, if you have any ideas, some thoughts about how we can celebrate that, we're all ears. We've got a team that's beginning to organize that. If anybody wants to join us in terms of planning that major event. Lionel alluded to Dene College that started as Navajo Community College in '68. They were the first tribal college to be established, and they celebrated their 50th here in September, and I had the privilege of representing Sinte and the Rosebud down there for their 50th anniversary, and a super program, and very inspirational to know that, again, the first tribal college in the country is celebrating its 50th, and we're right behind them. Dr. Jim.
Good morning. Just want to follow up a few things that Phil had mentioned. We're taking some steps. In fact, I guess if you look at that, the Founders Week motto and the phrase, it talks about the next chapter. And I remember too when people were going to translate that, and how do we translate chapter? So it sounds good. They decided not to, I think. If you look at the translation, I think how does it go? Sinte Gleska oayo angati na ha si chancho oyate ki Hocoka tchawo ichon Regalia-making. So they kind of avoided chapter. And part of the reason, we want to get to that with what we're trying to change now at Sinte, and we want to ask your advice on it, is you run into problems if you try to work with translations in teaching language too. I was over in Pine Ridge yesterday and I heard a story, and it reminded me, if I remember how it went now. How's it go? Winuchala and how Wichachala Okujati Eyapi. Naha Wichachala Gelila Hochba Kujacha. So this old man and woman went to the hospital because he had a really bad cough. So when they get there, they bring the man, back in the office to see the doctors, and so he goes back there and they check him out and do things, and then they come back, the nurse brings him back where the wife is sitting, and the old man wants to know what she tells him, because the wife asks, well, what's going on, what's the story? And the nurse says to the wife, he said, well, he's really hoarse, and we're going to give him a shot. So the old man's listening, doesn't understand, so he says to the wife, Takeaha. And she says to him, she says, Shukuwaka o kuje luhacha gat yenik diokta. You got a horse disease and they're going to shoot you. So it doesn't work. She was trying to take the English and put it into Lakota, and she says, well, you've got a horse. So they're going to shoot you. Well, the same thing happens in our teaching a lot. So our situation, as Phil was saying, and Lionel was saying especially, is in order to be a college, and in order for our students to receive money from the government, we have to pass certain accreditation tests. And up until maybe 15 or 10 years ago, the Higher Learning Commission, or North Central, was the accrediting agency for us. And they had a good understanding of flexibility. It's a tribal college, it's also a college. So you're the same and yet you're different. We'll work it out. But about 10 or 15 years ago, it started to be, yeah, you may be a tribal college, but in what way are you the same as us? How are you the same as us, the rest of us? Washichu colleges or any college, private, parochial. And that's made put a lot of pressure. There's been some effects in trying to show, if we can, yeah, we're the same as you. We do things just like you do, because it's not exactly true. So an alternative has, not an alternative, but another accrediting agency, Lionel, in 2003, was a founding member of the World Indigenous Nations Higher Education Consortium. Now it's up to, 140 some indigenous institutions from around the world that are a part of this. And they begin now to offer accreditation as well. So if HLC, Higher Learning Commission, says to tribal colleges and to Sinte, show us how you're the same as us, what WinHEC says, show us how you're different from these other colleges. Show us in what way you're indigenous. So that's the road we're on now. We're on both paths. And sometimes they conflict, but we're taking the World Indigenous Nations Higher Ed Consortium very seriously. But it requires us to look at what we're doing. We had to submit an eligibility statement, which only made us eligible for the process. So as a tribal college with tribal governance and tribal affiliation, Sinte obviously was eligible. But now it's a matter of them coming to see in what way we're different. And it's not enough to say, well, there's a Lakota Studies department where you can learn history and culture and work on language. That's not enough for them. So we have to take a look at, we've got an Institute for Indigenous Teaching along with Lakota Studies so that we can infuse not Lakota history and culture exactly into the other departments, but a way of teaching that's based on Lakota child raising. And that's a big undertaking. What I'd like to get to is one of the standards they're asking us to look at is the teaching of language. Actually, what they would like us to be able to show is what is our language of instruction. So for example, in Maori or in Hawaii, the colleges, all the courses are taught in the local language. Well, that's not where we are. It's a different history, different set of circumstances. So we've opted to say, well, we want to show you how our language of instruction, how we're teaching the language, is significantly different and based on indigenous principle. So that's what I just want to introduce briefly and then have Ben follow up and clarify some of it. We have a tough situation coming up because I think we've made some choices and I think we're going to get some resistance. So we'd really like your advice on how to deal with the resistance, because I'm sure many of you, obviously have dealt with making choices and then people saying, no, that doesn't make sense to me. Here's the two choices. The state allows or requires, if you're going to teach the language in the K-12 system, and BIE I think is not too different, they require two things. You need to pass a proficiency test, and you need to take a methods course. So that seems to be a fairly open door for a lot of people, and a lot more people are coming to the college asking to do that. We need to approve them, pass a proficiency test, and take a methods course. But the issue is, if you think about it, there's a lot of questions to ask and to answer about a proficiency test and about a methods course. So just briefly, I would like to give you an example of what we've decided to do and how I think we're going to get some resistance. In fact, we are. The main resistance is going to come from the proficiency test, and we've devised two proficiency tests, one for fluent speakers. That's not going to be an issue, obviously, for a fluent speaker, except because this proficiency test is going to certify you to teach in a public school system or a BIE system. We're also going to include reading and writing on the test. And for some people, that's maybe going to become an issue, some fluent speakers. Partly because the spelling is going to be so inconsistent. There hasn't been recently a lot of reading and writing, or especially writing. So, but the spelling is going to have to be consistent. We're not going to require any orthography, whatever the person's comfortable with. But what we've also done is we've devised a proficiency test for second language learners. And that's one of the issues, I think, to look at, or we've looked at. You're getting more and more people teaching in the K-12 system who are second language Lakota learners. What's proficiency mean in that case? Up until now, we've noticed people who feel typically that they've taken a number of classes, they can talk in English about Lakota grammar, they can translate certain words, that they feel they're qualified to teach because they know an awful lot about Lakota grammar and syntax. Should we qualify them and pass them? Are they qualified to teach? Our perspective is, after a lot of discussion, is we've looked more carefully, and here's what we've come up with, just if you're interested, but because it affects all the Lakota language that's going to be taught in the schools. More and more of the people being approved to teach in the schools are second language learners. How proficient should they be, and what does that mean? So just briefly, here's a couple things we've looked at. Proficiency for a second language learner. No, they don't need to speak as well as a fluent speaker. That's not going to happen. But they have to speak better than most of them do now. That is, they have to speak well enough to have an unexpected conversation about simple things. That doesn't seem to say much, but let me give you an example. Have an unexpected conversation about simple things. If they can't do that, then we're not going to approve them. So here's an example. This may not be a good one, but if you think of a conversation, an ordinary conversation, like juggling balls, okay, if you would. Most of us can throw one ball up in the air and catch it, okay? That's like working with translations. Some people can translate certain words, and you get a lot of that in the grade school. You get these worksheets where here's an English word, here's a Lakota word, and you cross them off. But that's not juggling. That's throwing a ball up in the air. Most of us can do that. So you see a lot of that going on. People come with that ability. Or another thing is, they can talk in English about Lakota grammar and syntax. So they can tell you how to conjugate verbs, they can tell you word order, and in Lakota, the adjective comes after the noun, unlike English, where it comes, the red truck, but in Lakota, it's going to be different. So they can talk in English pretty well, but that's like juggling a ball in one hand. That's not juggling. So people come and they can do that, and they say we're proficient. And we want to say, no. So here's the example. Let's say you're doing that. You might throw a ball up, you can translate a little bit. You can talk about Lakota grammar and syntax. You can use the dictionary. And someone throws you the third ball. I don't know if you've ever tried to juggle or not, but if you can catch. Someone throws you the third ball, they all fall on the ground. That third ball is someone says something to you unexpected. Simple grammar, simple conversation, I mean. I tried to write down a couple examples here. What you hear a lot, and we're very happy to hear it, is people will repeat a sentence they've memorized. Jim emachiapolo na minishota et emataha, and then you go into English. That's not juggling. That's throwing a ball up and down. So let's say you throw the third ball, and you're sitting around in where'd I have it? You're sitting around in your house, and your little brother comes in and says, just out of the blue, "Unchi tokiaha," and you have to respond. That's the throwing you the third ball. You never anticipated it. You didn't memorize anything. Unchi tokia ha. You have to respond. Ata unchi iyonka ha. Ata inila yankayo. Something, it's not hard, but to be able to say it on the spur of the moment, that's that third ball and you're juggling. Or unchi masopia kta ya. And then if he's your little brother and you want to tease him, you know, you add, naha, chamaska ita nichi chuktashni. It's unexpected but normal. You have to be able to expect that kind of stuff happens if you can talk a little bit. Let's say you're working in a school like a lot of the teachers are, and someone asks you about your class, just out of the blue. Lehiani ke wayawatona hip ha. What are you going to say? You never memorized it, you didn't expect it. Well, lehiani ke chona la hip cha. Akhe zapta ichala. Whatever. But you have to come up with it. So you're juggling, you're not juggling 4 balls or 5, you're not a fluent speaker, but you have to be able, we think, you know, you have to be able to do that. So we think we're going to get resistance. People are really proud that they can talk about Lakota grammar, they can translate some words. That should be enough. The problem we see is then they maybe go into the classroom and that's all they expect of their kids. To listen in English and repeat back, like any subject, what the teacher knows about something, and they repeat it back, and that doesn't help them talk. So our proficiency test will require this kind of normal response to observable actions and objects. And the reading and writing portion of the test will also be all in Lakota. It's not going to be testing their ability to translate. Have a story, you'll have to read it, answer some questions about it, maybe write a new episode in the story. So we expect to get resistance, as many people who are taking classes that teach Lakota grammar and use English translations don't seem to be getting people to speak. And Ben can talk a lot more about that. Ben teaches a lot of classes in the summertime and other places to fluent speakers about Lakota grammar and syntax. But if we just use that approach to non-speakers, we're helping them learn and speak more intelligent English about Lakota, but not necessarily to speak. Okay. If you have any advice on this kind of a decision, we really appreciate hearing that. It's maybe not a significant stand, but in some sense it's a stand. And it's not always easy, but you want to compliment people and encourage them to continue to learn, but not necessarily to go into the classroom. We can find ways for them to learn to speak, all of us, but until they're willing to do that or able to do that, then maybe they shouldn't be teachers. Second thing quickly is that the state requires a methods course along with the proficiency test. So most second language learners are used to taking a methods course. There are complications, but that doesn't bother them. I know we're going to get resistance from fluent speakers. And we already have. If a fluent speaker is asked to take a methods course, what it's suggesting is the fact that anyone can speak a language may not mean that they can teach it, and that's a real complicated thing. So we had a methods course last spring. We had 3 fluent speakers and 1 second language learner. One of the fluent speakers is currently teaching in elementary school, and she was real frustrated with what she was not able to do to the kids. She wanted to learn more. The second language learner was afraid to say anything in front of the speakers. But the 2 other speakers, we tried to work with them to get an agreement that we were going to try something different they hadn't seen before based on language learning. And their approach was, no. We need to teach you about language teaching. We already know, we're speakers. So it was kind of an impasse, and we think that's not so unusual. Our issue is, over the last 30 to 40 years, and I've been in university classes, tribal college classes, lived with the family, and everything the college classes have taught, and I haven't seen anything different yet, except here and there, is based on what linguists know about the language. If you can think back on stuff that the linguists have no understanding about how language learning works. At least as linguists, they don't. That's not their job. Their job is to take the language apart so they can communicate to other linguists and compare languages without ever having to speak them. So they mark every letter, so even if you don't know the language, you can pronounce it and compare. But it's not their job to ever know how the language learning works. But schools have tended to borrow from linguists for 40 years. I remember in '76, I was at University of Minnesota and I took a course from a fluent speaker. And I saw the book that she used. I learned nothing about speaking. I learned a lot about culture from her. But I came out to Pine Ridge and Black Hills had the same book. The linguists just share it and people keep borrowing from them. But there's a real difference between borrowing from a linguist who translates and marks and looks at language and talks about it, grammar, and teaches grammar, versus how does language learning actually work. And it's only the Maori and the Hawaiians and a few other people who have based it on language learning rather than the linguists who actually are getting their language back. It's a real different approach, but we learned how to do it, and we need people who are willing to take that and make it work for themselves and for their students. So we see two problems, some resistance, but we think it's important to have taken a step. We expect people to be able to juggle 3 balls, which is equivalent to maybe a 4, 5, or 6-year-old speaking in their first language. That's what we're asking for. It's not a lot, but it's not easy to get to unless you have a way to get there, and we think we can help. But until people are willing to try it, our proficiency test will require that, and our methods course will require people who know one language, who are fluent in Lakota, to go back and try working on another language so they can remember how difficult it is to learn a language, and it doesn't help to just have people talk at you. That's a real challenge. So just to keep in mind, that's some of the big steps. Ben, if you want to come up and make it clear or share a little bit of how you perceive things. Thank you. Pilame.
Itancan, Yuha chanto ashtea na Ikiciyusapelo. Lakota na Lakota wangspe cha kiapi ki hecha Woglakapi Itancan. Hani lila te khia washijia onspeo kichichia. Ata Sam echa watoha. Willock by Giktana washe chunke rosebudel. Chahechet kya nashlog hiukta igaloeake. Trokia iechinkianka kiha wiggly ashna nasotake. Cha mangala kong ho unshumakechi kuliake. Hocha tukter ta komene wiggly top gehad. Ata heta ishkinja hiuke we lock beta. Ash etanaji wachagana igloyake. Wigalio yo preli najiki ha. Dak prinkta huoyake. Itro put in quart of oil. Iprinktelo yake. Ochata hechata ughe ata igloya speech ichiake ata put in quart of oil. Saint Francis hel Cato ashna filling station wa Yuha. Inaji charshna ata iushki ashna heta hinabkhina nape chaize. Lila wiushki ashna oi chakia. Chaka Sam una wana el hinajinke. Saint Francis el Valandra station. Kach ol huge yokha. Wachagana Cato tiopa yuhana eta hinabkhake. Icha hinabkhake. Ha, good morning. Ake. Cha Sam huge ina oinud oich inucha. Punini, ake. Hetant khahena kia tua good morning ya chashna. Punini unkia unkish. I don't have probably a lot to say in addition to what Jim had to say. I spent 50 years teaching Lakota language. Started way back in '68. And the first language program that I was aware of course, it started before then probably in different places. But the one that I was aware of was when I started working for St. Francis Indian School. At that time, it was still under the mission, so it was called St. Francis Mission High School and Grade School. Excuse me. And they decided to teach Lakota language in the school. And the first year, they had one of the Jesuit scholastics develop some language teaching materials. In fact, he taught Lakota language at St. Francis Indian School. And he started putting together a lot of materials that he was using. And we helped him. I was working at the education center at the time. And then there were several other people that worked there. Victor DeVille was with us, I think, or he was there shortly after. Leroy Hershert and several other people were there. So we helped him put this material together. And he taught the class for a year. And then after 1 year, I got hired as the teacher of Lakota language. And they gave me the materials that this Jesuit developed. And they were interesting, good materials. The only problem was they offered the Lakota language class to every grade, from first grade to 12th grade. And they expected me to teach Lakota language to first grade to 12th grade every single day. Now, I spoke Lakota, of course. It seemed like that was the only requirement that I had at the time. I didn't even have a college degree. I didn't have any training in teaching, much less teaching language. And the only thing I could do with Lakota was that I could speak it fluently. That's all I spoke. Lakota Woglakapi. Tohata hecheri mancha. That's all I spoke. And then I did learn how to read and write Lakota a little bit, not a whole bunch. But my mother used to teach me how to read and write Lakota. So I wrote things down in Lakota, and then when I was in high school, I typed them out. And so I had some knowledge, some experience in knowing how to read and write Lakota. But that was it. So literally, with absolutely no experience, no training, no development, no nothing, I started teaching Lakota to first grade, second grade, third grade, all the way up to 12th. It was terrible, bad experience. It gave me the impression that the Jesuits were trying to make it fail right from the start. They decided to teach Lakota to the kids, but it was built for failure. And I had a really, really tough time. Now, the materials, like I said, the materials were good. I think after I left that place, Education Center, I started working for Sinte at the time. After I left, Victor DeVille and Leroy Hairshirt and Caroline, what was her name? She used to teach Lakota. And then several other people, they got together with a linguist who was a Russian linguist. And they started putting together a book, lesson book. And I think they used a lot of the materials that were developed, the materials that we used. And you can still see that book. It still exists. I don't know if it's still for sale or not, but it's called Lakota Wocekiye. It's a green book, hardcover book, and it's got lessons in there. Lesson 1 to, I don't know how many, 25. So they did publish that. They did finish all those lessons that we started at that time. They did publish it. And I think they gave it to Sinte to publish it. So if you look at the book, it says Sinte University. So that was, to me, at least in my world around here, that was the beginning of teaching Lakota language. And I taught as much as I could. I left. And then we started, of course, Sinte College, and we were trying to get an Associate of Arts degree for Indian Studies right at the beginning. So we had to fight the Board of Regents, kept meeting with them every month to try to get that approved. We had language, culture, song and dance, history, thought and philosophy. We developed all those things, and then we used local expertise. People who were medicine men, they started a medicine men and associates group, and we used local expertise to teach all those classes. My father taught the song and dance class. He sang all his life, so he knew most of the traditional songs, and so he used to teach me in Lakota all about singing. I never took interest in that, so I never became a singer, but he taught me everything he knew about song and dances. So we offered a class in that, and we hired Dr. Ron Tice, who had a PhD in English, I think, but he was a powwow singer. He knew all about songs and dances. So we combined my dad's knowledge with Ron Tice's knowledge and experience. We put those together, and we published a book. It's called Songs and Dances of the Lakota. It's out of print now, but you can still find copies of it, I think. But at the beginning, our intention was to try to teach our students, Sinte University students, all these things, songs and dances, thought and philosophy, dealt with ceremonies, and language. I was on the lookout for, constantly on the lookout for, first of all, teaching materials in Lakota, and there was hardly any at that time. And then we consulted a lot of linguists. You know, we brought them in, had them teach us about teaching language and so forth. And eventually, the University of Colorado, the linguists from there, the linguistic department, the people from there came down to do research on Lakota language because they were developing material for their program. So they came down, I met with them, and we didn't have anything, you know, just what we developed, you know, Beagle's dictionary and so forth. But anyway, in visiting with them, they agreed to help us, to work with me. And so while they were developing their materials, they used to send copies of those down here to me so that I could use those to teach Lakota language. And I learned all about Lakota grammar from there. I learned by teaching, using it, by teaching it. And I learned all about the sound system of Lakota. And I learned all about the syntax of Lakota. And everything they presented, I used. In other words, I learned by using all that stuff. So through that process, I kind of acquired knowledge about Lakota, which I didn't know, the sound system of Lakota, which I didn't know, the syntax of Lakota, which I didn't know, the meanings of words and things like that. I learned a lot of stuff using the University of Colorado materials. So I started using that. And we used to have orthography meetings at that time, back in the 80s. We talked about all the different ways of writing Lakota orthography. And we used to get into big arguments about, you know, how ours was better, or, you know, no, mine is better, that kind of stuff, you know. But anyway, ultimately what it comes down to is, you know, Lakota uses a set of sounds to create words. Now, how you write that doesn't matter. Once you learn that sound system, you can write anything. You can use Chinese characters if you want, or whatever. It doesn't matter. As long as every sound that Lakota uses is represented. So anyway, the main thing, perhaps, the main reason why we didn't use that was because of the arguments over orthography. Now, some of the grammar, of course, made it into Lecce Albert's book. If you're familiar with that, you know, the concept of enclitics. You know, what's an enclitic? Well, if you go to his book, you can find out. That came from the University of Colorado. Enclitics are all these little words that come at the end. Ksto, kta, bi, you know, yellow. Those are all enclitics. And very, very critical stuff. Not too long ago on Facebook, somebody asked about ksto. They said, what really does that mean, ksto? And I didn't get a chance to answer it, but ksto was used by females, and it's like a written period in a sentence. Just like he is a written question mark. It's a spoken question mark. Ksto is a spoken period at the end of a sentence. That's all it is. Nothing complicated, you know. Long time ago, grandmas used to use ksto all the time. Like men use yellow all the time. It's just like putting a period at the end of a sentence. But since our language started out as non-written, it was an oral language, we had to end our sentences someplace. So men used yelo and welo, and women used ksto or kishto. So anyway, simple questions like that are still, people are still asking those things. Today, I just read that on Facebook, you know. So the value of learning grammar and all this stuff, syntax and sound system, you know, all of that stuff is important. It's significant. If you're going to teach Lakota, it's good to learn those things. Just like I cannot walk over here and put myself in the classroom to teach English. You know, I speak English perfectly well. At least I think I do. But I can't do that. To teach English in the classroom, I have to learn English grammar. I have to learn English sound system. And I have to learn syntax, you know, things like that. So that knowledge is important for speakers. If you want to be a teacher, you need to learn that stuff. And you need to go through the process of doing that. If you don't teach it yourself, you need to go to school and learn those things. It's that simple. If you want to be a Lakota language teacher, learn that stuff. And like Jim said, when you teach, you go in the classroom. If you're a teacher, you go in the classroom. You're not going to teach those kids grammar, syntax, you know, verbs, nouns, you know, enclitics, things like that. You're not going to teach those kids that stuff. You need to teach those kids to speak Lakota. Lakota, yeah, unspewicak. Tohan Lakota spebhat Lakotia unspebhata hehal Ohaka le umanglena ukte. Then they can learn grammar and sound system and writing system and orthography and all that stuff. That comes afterwards. So our challenge to be effective teachers is to teach Lakota so that the students that we are teaching speak Lakota. Not just colors, numbers, you know, phrases. They need to be able to. I had a really tough time in high school. I told my wife, I said, I didn't speak English when I graduated high school. She said, no, that's not possible. You knew English. You spoke English. I couldn't speak English socially. You know, I couldn't go to a dance. We used to have dances all the time in the gym or playroom or whatever. I used to go to dances, and I was a wallflower. Not a flower, but a weed. Because I couldn't speak English, you know. I could only speak Lakota. I didn't know how to speak English. I knew English. I could understand everything that somebody says in English. I can understand that. I read books all the time in high school. But I couldn't speak English myself. Whenever my sisters visited me at dances or socials, we used to have conversations. They would say things in English to me, and I would respond in Lakota. They answer me in English. You know, that's how our conversations went, you know, between my sisters, because I couldn't speak English. Didn't know how to speak English. And that's the reverse of what Jim was just talking about. Jim learned Lakota. I have a lot of friends, white people that speak Lakota. But if they get in a crowd of Lakota speakers, it's very difficult for them to speak Lakota. They have a tough time. That's the reverse of what I just said. I had a tough time speaking English because I didn't know how to speak English, you know. I went to college, not to get a college education, but to learn how to speak English. That's why I went to a white institution. I figured there would be a sea of white people. If I put myself in the middle of those people, I will be forced to either learn to speak English or fail. I went to college to learn how to speak English because I didn't know how when I graduated high school. And that's the same problem that a lot of Lakota speakers are having today that are learning as a new language. So we have to teach these students that we are teaching Lakota to, we have to teach them to speak Lakota. Get them to start speaking Lakota right from the start. It doesn't matter how simple it is. You have to get them to start speaking Lakota from the start. One of the methods that we learned, Jim and I, and there are a lot of people that learned it. In fact, Uncle Albert was there when Caleb Gattegno came to Pine Ridge and taught the silent way of teaching Lakota, or teaching languages. He came to Pine Ridge and taught Lakota using the silent way. And the silent way of teaching languages gets you to speak Lakota, or speak the language that you're learning right from the start. And they say that people who learn using the silent way speak like a native. And it takes 1 year. It's not magical. You still have to learn. It takes 1 year to learn a language. And they can speak fluently. They can sit there and converse with each other fluently in the language. So that's a proven method. The silent way is a proven method. You use color charts to start using sounds and so forth. So those are proven methods. And I spent all my life working with linguists at the University of Bloomington. They were interested in learning, teaching Lakota in Standing Rock to people who asked them. There were a lot of people that were hired in Standing Rock who knew a little bit of the language, and they asked them if they could teach Lakota. So they started looking for materials, methods of teaching, experts who can help them with their teaching, develop lessons, and so forth. They couldn't find anybody. And that's when Jan Ulrich, the linguist from the Czech Republic, he learned the language by coming over and living with a family for 20 years and speaks Lakota fluently. He was a linguist studying languages. When he was leaving, one of the teachers there at Standing Rock came to him and told him what her problem was. They asked me to teach Lakota. I speak it, but I don't know how to teach. I don't know anything about the language. So they started a summer institute 11 years ago on Standing Rock. They developed lessons with CDs. We're up to 5 lessons. A dictionary, we put out a dictionary. I have it at the office. And 2 years ago, we just published a grammar, Lakota grammar book. I have my name on there because I helped Jan Ulrich put that together. My expertise is Lakota, speaking the language. His expertise was knowing about the language. So we joined forces, put it together, and we put out, and the grammar book that we put out is called A Pedagogical Grammar. I can show it to you, it's at my office. Anyway, it's for sale. Pedagogical Grammar. And the intention of that grammar is for anybody who's learning Lakota to use the grammar to learn Lakota. So we put out enough materials with the Lakota Language Consortium, we put out enough materials that anybody can use those materials and learn to speak Lakota. And that also is a proven method. It's proven. There's a guy in Italy, I keep using him as an example, Alessio, whatever his name is, you know. He lives in Italy, never saw an Indian, right in the middle of Italy. And using our stuff, our materials, CDs, DVDs, textbooks, he taught himself to speak Lakota. And if you get on Facebook, on the site where we have language forum, if you get on there, he's on there. And he asks questions in Lakota. Wocekiye Eyapi. He speaks Lakota, you know? Never saw an Indian. So that, again, the material that we put out is proven stuff, proven material. So I'm not saying we're not selling these things. We're just, I mean, they're available. We produce them. That's a long road. It took 50 years for me to get there. When I started out 50 years ago, I had nothing. The only expertise I had when I started out was to speak Lakota fluently. And I didn't even know how to speak English. But this is what I wanted. Today, we have it. We have all those language materials that we put out. We put out the Berenstain Bears. We translated that into Lakota. And it's available. You can have it. There's a teacher's guide that goes with it. So we produced enough materials for anybody to take those and learn Lakota. And there are also other proven methods, the silent way of teaching. And I'm sure there are others. The TPR is what we used in our lessons with the LLC. TPR means total physical response. That's the method of teaching that we use in that. So I'm taking up too much of your time but like I said, like Jim said, we want your input in what we do because we're not here for ourselves. We're not the important guys. You guys are. You need to input your information. What is it that you want? What are the needs out there that we can meet? I think that's the bottom line. Pilamaya. Yuha chanto ashtaran pe choose up.
Phil's going to check on the meal time. So Ben commented on your input. If I could just ask one quick comment here. The learning experience, we go back and forth a lot. And I noticed a couple of things I just want to throw out and get your opinion on if I could. And Ben's too, if it's all right. You noticed how a lot of times people will say, and Ben said it too, I wouldn't want to go into an English class and teach unless I knew English grammar and syntax and so on and so forth. But it might be good to keep in mind, in that English class, you're talking to speakers. They already know the language. So if you want to teach syntax and grammar, you're not teaching them the language. They already speak the language, and this is learning about your language. If they didn't speak English, we have to ask ourselves, would they learn to speak English by learning English grammar and syntax? It's a good question. you know. And Ben taught me too, how when he said, as a senior, even though he understood English perfectly, he couldn't speak it socially, if I understand right. And I think that's an insight that we often miss with our students. We think teaching language is like teaching another subject. You're already speaking English, let me teach you something in English about history or science. But if you don't know the language, I can't teach that way. How do I teach language? And I would say Ben's example is right at the heart of it. Every one of, I would say every student that we teach will do anything in the world, like Ben, will do anything in the world to avoid speaking the language. I think we forget that. If you have someone from like Czechoslovakia, and Ben and I have talked about this, if you have someone from Italy, Czechoslovakia, they've grown up in countries where there are 3, 4, 5 languages. They've watched their parents and their relatives use those other languages and learn them. It's a positive thing. And by the time they're 3 years old, they're practicing the sounds of these languages. So they don't resist speaking another language. Every student here, like Ben, and I know for myself, every student we work with will do anything in the world to avoid speaking the language in public. So the more we teach in English, this is my experience, and this may contradict, you know, the more we speak in English, the more they love it. If you talk Lakota, this is my experience, if you talk Lakota grammar and syntax, I will listen for 3 hours. If you stop it and show me a way to start talking, I'll probably leave the class or I'll sit back and not say anything. That's how I was. And that's how every student I face is. They love to hear you talk in English about Lakota and learn about it. It is almost impossible for an English or a Lakota student growing up in this country or on the reservation to feel comfortable going through what they need to do to speak. You have to back up from the most fundamental thing you've ever learned, which is to put these English sounds to your thoughts. Once you've done that, and someone asks you to back up and act like a 2-year-old again, you can forget it. They won't do it. Unless you can find a way to get them talking like Ben says. So that's it. So if you guys could share, who would like to share a little bit their experience teaching? Again, our issue is, I think, how much should we expect second language learners who are applying to be teachers, how well should they speak? And secondly, how much have you borrowed from linguists and find yourself talking in English about Lakota in your classes? Because what else can you do? You can translate and juggle one ball. It's not talking. You can talk about English grammar and they can tell you how to conjugate, but it's not juggling. How do you get them when you throw them that third ball to understand and to respond? Any comments, you guys? I on? Oh.
Haho, tushika, wajini kashnashnia, Yuha chunterastea na pitches up below. La colwe chokanki, Hocoka Eyapi, haye, bleach Eyapi, Yuha uelo, haye, otakuyena, mitra kola, heota yelo. Hi, Ampetukale, which are some Wocekiye Eyapi Marty makes you. Ozula, la Colichokankile, Yuha, Na le chas I Woglakapi la kototwe ke chas loanka iptichte. Good morning to each and every one of you, and I shake hands with everybody here. And I want to say thank you to my relatives for inviting me here this morning to share a few thoughts with you. And I want to say thank you to Lionel Bordeaux for your opening remarks. And I was really listening to the things that he touched on about things that are happening that shouldn't be happening in and amongst us. And these things, ampetu ito yohi wa uyankapi na ohumpi oyukshite leshktatu ha hokshilon Cont'd. Himkamitaki hinana kap na chetik na tak oislashni lehianiki. Oyatiki uyuitapi na taku Woglakapi tunka duki taku unka Eyapik tohena Woglakapi na eta huablese eta kibanite ni eptekte. This morning, Mr. Bordeaux mentioned a few things that we see these things each and every day that we lived here. And on our reservation, this is our home. We are born here and we live here, and when it comes to our final resting place, we are buried here amongst our relatives. One of the things that really caught my attention that was mentioned was suicide. We, as Sundance people, as spiritual people, we pray for Wicawotapi. We pray that life would continue for our relatives. Tuktektil unkitake ki wichokuje asne pichashni Wicawotapi. And dokishke lahantechaki ich ikteokteknisa. And I myself, I really I have experienced being at the bedside of a nephew who tried to commit suicide. And I went to the hospital to see a granddaughter who was admitted for trying to commit suicide. Dokishke Elina wawimukekichi. It's from the oppression, internal oppression. And I know at one time in the sweat ceremony, it was mentioned that we have all these sun dances and ceremonies, but yet we're not making anything. But you know, we as a human being, we are made with decisions. We know what is good and what is bad. And I do stand to be corrected here, but I am happy and honored to be in the midst of some of our spiritual leaders who have sun dances, have sweat lodges. We make these things available to our people, to our family, to come, join, sing, pray for our relatives, for a better life. And that's our way, correct me, but that's our way of reaching out to our people. And so it is that over the years that I've been in and around our elders, when Uncle Albert was alive, he would always say, and ever since he's gone, I've never been invited to a sweat ceremony. But that's the way of our old people. And these things, I really am grateful to Sinte University because when you have your graduation ceremonies, you invite our mourners to have wiping of the tears ceremony for them. And I'm really grateful We talk about our grandchildren, but later we koshkalaka won't be huniki na lehan tat kani high school el wa ospe chak here. I have a grandson that last year he missed school, he was skipping, and then all of a sudden one of the graduates from Sinte is teaching at Kani High School. And you know, my grandson, when he met her and she stepped into the picture, he gets up in the morning by himself and he wants to go to school. And that's the impact that our people, we can make for each other. And I know I myself, when I was going to Todd County School, the one person that really inspired me and wanted me to, that desire to come to school was my favorite teacher, and that was Ray Beard. And some of us, we're not athletic and we're not nerds, and even down in elementary, some of us boys, Lakota na Woglakapi na Lakota Wocekiye. And it was hard for us to understand it, some of the work. And so we were labeled as slow learners, almost retarded. And we were put in summer school. And that summer, they brought in some men to help us. And they were really intrigued with us, that we could speak our language when we're playing. And that was some of us. There was Pierre Blue Horse and Hobart Black Bear and Fred Witt, and there was about 4 or 5 of us. We played talking in our language, and that drew up an interest. And here that fall, they hired Aunt Mercy Portman to come in and teach Lakota language to the teachers, and Aunt Mercy recruited me to help her. And from that day on, I wanted to be a Lakota language teacher, because some of us, we struggled with our language. That's a big impact that Sinte has made on, from speaking from experience on suicide. And we reach out. Nina oinikahe, Wicawotapi. Nina lakol Wocekiye Eyapi. But the saying goes, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. I wish that for my family. The drugs, the meth, pishy smoking, that takes precedence. Legally lashna ibelukcha, tukteta nina unspepihi. They always talk about our elders. But I always think, well, what did you learn from them? When I was in and around them, they spoke Lakota. I didn't see them drunk. I didn't see them doing drugs. I didn't see them molesting women. I didn't hear them asking for money for ceremonies. I was really happy, and I was taken with some of my relatives here about how it was that we grew up with our language. And I taught Lakota language for 16 years, and that was one of the things. I had a wonderful time. I was happy to teach the language, but we had some drawbacks. But I didn't listen to it. But as was mentioned earlier, my goal, my objective was Ikiciyuskinpi. That was the goal and objective that I had, was at least from me teaching them, they learned at least one word that they could take with them throughout their life. And as was mentioned, we really, just because we're fluent speakers doesn't always make us a good teacher. But I learned along the way. And one of the drawbacks that I had was lesson plan. And when I went to North Elementary, the administrator there, Pat Burnett, pulled me aside and said, this is how you make a lesson plan, your benchmarks, your objectives, your goals. So my teaching, I felt like, a roadmap was made for me, and I could teach better. And one of the things that a drawback was we had to make our own teaching materials. And as Lakota teachers, and I do stand to be corrected at that, we don't have teaching materials like the regular classroom teacher. They already have books made that their teacher aide can go and copy them off. In the language program, we didn't have a secretary, we don't have a teacher's aide. And so I used to stand at the copy machine after school hours, and one time I got locked in, so I had to call Pat and say, hey, Pat, come let me out. She had the biggest laugh. She said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I was at the copy machine to take time to make my teaching materials. And I think that helped her understand that as Lakota teachers, we make our own teaching materials. I really got a big laugh at one of my coworkers. Toches curriculum Wicawotapi. She used to say that all the time. Teaching materials, the curriculum. We really had fun teaching. But nowadays, when I went to teach, the thing that we had to do was mentioned here earlier was to test them. It's supposed to be oral language. They give us a notebook and ask the children to identify, try and say these words. I said, what? We're contradicting ourselves. My goal and my objective was to teach the young people. I know that they don't come from Lakota-speaking families. My goal was I wanted them to learn something, understand, know it so that they could take it home and teach their family. And I come from a family of singing. My grandma, my grandpa, my Uncle Cecil Spotted Elk, they all like to sing. So that was the method that I tried using to teach the children days of the week, colors, shapes, body parts, basics. Woglakapi. Just the basics and build on that. And I even teach them the flag song and one of the Sundance songs to sign language. The old people. Woglakapi. Okay, I did motion hand sign language to some of the songs. And the kids got a big kick out of that. And nowadays, when I'm going back and forth, I'll pick up a hitchhiker and say, oh, I remember you, you're Mr. Blue Thunder. You was my teacher, and you try to teach us. I said, did you remember anything? Yeah, you always came in and said, I'm happy to see you, was the translation I gave them. Always happy to see you. And I asked one of my former students, I said, well, what did you remember? I said, I remember the song you taught us the days of the week. Wakan, Hocoka, Nupa, Yamni, Topa, Zaptang, oh, Wicawotapi. Yat Isya, I tried to teach them to pronounce it, enunciate it, perfect. Like was mentioned here earlier, natural-born speaker. And when I was teaching at Larbrule, when I got word of them making dictionary, I teach the high school students to write the words down, fruits, vegetables, animals. We try to say them in Lakota and write them down, and I send them to the computer, and I had them make their own dictionaries. Put a picture to this horse. Put a picture to the strawberry. And one of the things drawbacks that we always run into, well, my grandma doesn't say it like that. This is a different dialect, and I said, hey, then why aren't you speaking it? Why aren't you not speaking your language then? You have the access at home of how grandma says it, and one of those times I invited the elders, Upo. I reached out to the elders in the community. Come and help me teach your grandchildren how to speak their language. I had a non-Indian person that came to stay with me for about 2 months. He was up at Lower Brule. He came to stay with me. Now, every day for about 2 hours, we try to sit and try to teach him, help him to learn how to speak fluently as Wocekiye Eyapi ogna ata conjugated Woglakina. Na tuakchi omasa ogna Lakota Woglakinish loam unkip church na Lakolia wachikab nish unkichat ata Tauchinki ata little kahomania, wiukcha yankicha, oablis washte. Because the way they taught me, the way they said it, that's not the way. I'm not hearing it when I get up with you fluent speakers. Yeah, I said, by writing it and learning to read it like that, we don't speak like that. We got a big laugh. I didn't make fun of him, but we had a lot of fun. One of the things was, I said, I said, you talk the feminine side of the language. You're a man, so let's try and teach you how to talk like a man. Is there a difference? Yeah, that was mentioned. I want to move on. I don't want to take up a lot of time here, but I've really had experience in Walehantukichi to make sure the language goes on is that you have to hear it. And I really admired one of our non-Indian people who's just like a family to us. And I asked him, I said, Bob, how did you learn the language? Did somebody sit down and write and conjugate and all that? And he said, no. He said, I heard it. And when I wanted to know something, I asked again and again. And a lot of you from Spring Creek area, that's Bob Perner. The other person that I really admired that picked up the language was Jerry Mohat. He asked me to tell a story, gave me a blank white sheet of paper. He said, tell your story. So I'll tell him the story about how Lala Blue Thunder tell me the story about how the pipe came to our people. Kalila itumaphe, he understood me. But over the years, I've really, those two people have really stood out in my mind as picking up the language. O hisko ka hinska yankabna oabna yawapshin na umpi. Take lehantukichi technology wonglakahankichi. I would make CD. That's how it is that I teach different the high frequency words that we use on a daily basis and how to say prayer in Lakota. Make us burn it onto CD and listen to it. Listen to it, and you have to feel those words. Go oecha dokashna. Ayat insya lachlukinkte. Nataku yako he dokashna pamphala yoptin chichinkte. what it is that you're trying to say will go through without a doubt, without hesitation. Then I wanted to also mention our Lakota ceremonies. And I'm really happy to see a lot of our relatives here that are spiritual leaders and advisors. And as Lakota spirituality, we do what the best we can. And I know from my experiences, from listening to my grandmother, my grandfathers, and them, they always told me, don't say you're a sun dancer or a pipe carrier until you've done and completed all 7 ceremonies that are with the pipe. Over my short course of life, I tried to do all the ceremonies, but the one I couldn't do was the throwing of the ball, because that's a woman's ceremony, that's a girl's puberty ceremony. And I thought, oh, kishke ichamayunka. And here, two of my granddaughters, when they reached the age of puberty, we had the throwing of the ball ceremony. And I felt happy for them. I dressed them up in white buckskin, and I had them help me make little balls, stuff buffalo hair in them, and beat them. And I told my sister, I said, I said, you should know these things. I said, we niyak. But they all looked at me and they said, well, you was raised by mom and grandma, and they told you these things, so you do it. I advised my sister how to do the ceremony, how to go about it. My son-in-law wanted to get out there and support his. I said, that's just a woman's ceremony. A man needs to stay out of it. So I had Aunt Mabel, and anyway, I had 4 generations of women out there for my granddaughter. We do the best we can with what we know and what we've been shared with from the elders. And as far as the educational part, I know one of the big words that I have heard lately is decolonization. But you know, I walk into our classrooms here on the reservation, and I see the American flag hanging, and I was thinking, gee, how come they don't get the tribal flag posted in the classroom? That's just, you know, something simple. And then I wanted to touch on, as was said earlier, back in the day, Sinte really had honor for our elders, made our Medicine Men Association, and really kept our people together. And since, you know, the passing of many of our relatives, some of these things have fallen by the wayside. And I think that I would encourage Sinteglishka ake, we talk ake Yuha Ikiciyuskinpi nahakshi unkeo thankalaka ea o Eyapi na ea hina lila wasluliapi. We still have some living treasures amongst our people out in the boonies. And when I need something or want something, I usually go out there to them. And some of our elders have never ever gotten any kind of recognition, so to speak. And I think one of the ones that I still go out to is Twin Genevieve Running Horse Moore. And I used to go over to Bull Creek to Likshi, Mr. Eagle Star. I didn't know he was really from Ring Thunder. And over to Belk's Camp, Mercedes Andrews, Nanakil. I grew up with the old people. When I go towards Corn Creek in that area, I look for the old people. And the old people used to say, when somebody made their walk down, and I never thought that I would get to that point where I don't have nobody to talk to. That's no roya or loya uncle. And back in the day, Opata When we lived in Horse Creek, that's how it was. My grandfathers would greet each other. When Lala Ed White Buffalo would be driving down the lane, he'd be singing, and Lala Ben Spotted Tail would pick it up on this end, and that's how they greeted each other, was with the song. And I noticed that we're singing people. We love to sing. And so I was really, that was my way of approaching the language and trying to teach the language was through song, hoping that our children will pick up that song. They will learn these things. And the other thing that I wanted to briefly touch on was what was mentioned here about culture. Is we have protocols, but you know, we're kind of tolerant, and we forget those. Ishtokash wa iak sapapi wichawa hokuki kihina tuktel unglushna piseche. Maybe we failed along the way, but always remember Unchi Alice Four Horns. She used to tell me and kind of keep me in line, so to speak. And I was really fortunate that I was really fortunate that, you know, the elders, they never got after me, but they always talked to me in a good way, in a learning experience. And so it was like that I always remember Alice Four Horns. She liked to sing and tell me things. And it's really different when it comes to our culture, especially our ceremonies. We have people, our own family members that come to our sun dances under the influence thereof. Last year, there was a young group that came in, and where they were parked, they dropped a meth pipe. And I thought, gee, they have grandmas, they come from Sundance families, and they come from powwow families, and now we have the big thing about, you know, one of my relatives went and told me, he said, and the old people, they used to tell, someplace we lost that along the way. Again, I want to say thank you to my relatives that invited me here today, and for the many, it's just really good to see each and every one of you. And my grandma used to say, somebody must have treasured us so that we get to see each other. And so I wanted to say thank you. And in closing, I want to sing a song. And again, I learned this from one of my elders that I hung out with the past 20 years till he walked on. I hate Yuha, oh yeah, yeah, bello, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, I hopilama pelomitaki namechu kumpiki. Thank you.
Astelo. Floritin oppilaat kanko keninja. Tank taas no Regalia-making ja Lionel. Naja hielo. Na hel ta kuku chahel opjebila kelele samkhale Wicawotapi. Florentine talked about when the institution first started, Stanley Redbird and them organized medicine men and associates. We got a little kickback at times. It's even issued card-carrying medicine men, members, and associates. But it was really a good gathering. And I remember going to the many meetings and listening to our spiritual healers talk about different events or history. And that in part is kind of what we're hoping that our medicine men here, spiritual leaders, culturalists, can begin to come back to. We need that type of cultural and spiritual guidance. And I'm going to mention an individual who come to my office the other day, Isidore Zephyr, longtime sun dancer on the Itancan, around Marty Wagner. And I was telling him about some of these sun dancers who were Humbletching, and a couple told me that lions appeared and sat down with them for the evening. And he said, Lionel, he said, I had an experience here this summer, and I need to tell you so that at some point you can talk to and tell others. And while I'm not in that category of people that I just mentioned, I'm thankful that it was medicine men who recruited me for whatever reason and took me out of my PhD program in Minnesota and my 10 years with the Bureau of Indian Affairs with all kind of good benefits and ceremonies that Frank Pickett-Penn and Robert Steed did when they were looking for somebody to head up this institution. Stanley come to University of Minnesota and told me that my name come through in those ceremonies. And I told him, you know, that certainly I was honored, humbled, but I didn't grow up with those ceremonies, but I did grow up with the language. And he said, evidently they saw something in you that you were selected. And something is working, because I'm going on my starting the 48th year here as president of SGU. But really, I thank all of you and the people who are not here and our supporters amongst the Oyate tribal government and our friends amongst the Ocheti Shakoi nationwide and globally who support this institution. But back to what Isidore said. He said he was Humbletching and he heard this heavy sound walking behind him. And of course he didn't turn around and look back. He kept praying and it come closer and closer. And pretty soon it stood just behind him to the left. and started talking Lakota to him from a pretty good tall position. And what he come across was this individual, spiritual being that approached him, started talking Lakota, and introduced himself as Wicawotapi. Wicawotapi, my understanding, is what Washichus call Sasquatch, Bigfoot. He had Wicawotapi come and told him to go back to the people, the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota, and tell them that the Wicawotapi is concerned about their fellow relatives, that there are too many things happening on their homelands that should not be happening. And unless the spiritual leaders and healers come together and begin to talk about this and to begin to mobilize the Oyate, everybody, and come together and discuss how is it and what is it that they're going to do to begin to minimize what's happening so that future generations don't continue to suffer this. And that the Wiwila Oyate was praying for their fellow two-legged. And Isidore was instructed to go home and to spread this message. And I guess you know what Florentine was saying and what happened yesterday and what's happening. You know, in part, as we're talking about our next step as an institution and as Oyate, in the hope that we can come together and begin to sit down and to talk about what is it that we need to do to address and strengthen every area that affects the quality of our daily life. I remember Leonard Crowdog talking about, had tribal Lakota spiritual leaders been in attendance at the 1868 treaty, he said we would have a different treaty today. But it's pretty much what Stanley Redbird had when he at my inauguration. We had about 12 medicine men who inaugurated me and talked to me that day. And Stanley utilized spiritual leaders to help create this institution. And we've always tried to keep that spiritual dimension to who we are as an institution, because we know that's where our ancestry continues to give us guidance and strength.
We have been talking about Wakwatapi kala iwachi maya picha dona Wayaki hipiki. Wocekiye mujio. Ukshaka bina woite kala yuna ukichu bina Trogata kuyapiki. Apete kala ta kuku nachje ota Woglakapi chala. We have Takashla Wakataka Takashla. A particular Owayo Wakatua Kalecha. Walashna Wanitikilina, Racha, Oyate Kawitapina. Takota, Oyate Trokataka Yapiktaki. Tukrona Owasha Kapna, Ogicha Kapna. Yushke Zania Oyapiktaki, and I chatakashla. The Naake, you blah here. I hear Emki in a capita. Oya particular Yaniki. Objabla ake Emki in a cabna, Woitua. Ina ahiu kitila kapiglet kashla. Yuha ne etke otroka hon yapikta. Woitekele on. Nija yeyakat na lupejutapiki kashla. Makakala la kan kankakana wakanja wichunglapik na uzani pikta. Na hetsa kashla. Na akantoshni oyate nija woitekele. Iekiyapina ikikchupa. Nija Yushke Oyaga Picte, Oyonichi Chapelo, Mitake Oyase.
Well, it's lunchtime here, so we're going to invite you folks to partake in a meal here in the Commons area. Some of our students are getting ready for their 1 o'clock class, so we give them a little permission to get a jump start. But we got a good program this afternoon. We again invite you to stick around here. In about 45 minutes, we'll pick up the discussion, and we have more people coming. But again, people that are here, you're certainly welcome to speak when we get to the topic areas. Our maintenance staff are doing their best with the roads, but they caution us that it's pretty slick out, and looks like you still have to put rocks in your pockets, but that won't give you any traction on the ice. So just be really, really careful, folks, if you will. And enjoy the meal, and in about 45 minutes, we'll come back together and pick up where we left off.